In today's modern age, it's pretty easy to take things for granted. A popular example of this is the cell phone. People like to say your phone is more powerful than what got us to the moon, but in reality, at this point, they're about as powerful as your laptop was 5 years ago. But it's just part of our lives now. Some people don't know a world without cell phones in everyone's pocket. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but their proliferation has really been taken for granted at this point. The first iPhone came out in 2006, and since then, the adoption of the modern idea of a cell phone has exploded, even though the idea isn't even 20 years old yet. And if you look around you, you'll start to notice all of the things you take for granted about modern life. The more you think about it, the more you realize it's not just the high-tech stuff. Dishwashers, pencils, ice cube trays, lint rollers, the list is seemingly endless. We've created a world we take for granted full of everyday items that just make life easier. And yet, how often do we take a moment to appreciate them? Each of these inventions and systems have a history and a reason for their existence, but some histories are harder to find, especially with things that we really take for granted. Like toilet paper, who came up with it? Why do we use it? When did that become part of the human experience? And shockingly, there isn't a whole lot of material on the subject, which is odd considering it's something we use every day, or multiple times a day if we're lucky. Possibly it's because the normal trivialities of life seldom get recorded in the history books, much less something that people find embarrassing like taking the Browns to the Super Bowl. But I did the research. I wanted to know how this came to be. Wiping one's ass is a social construct, so how did it get constructed? Really? This is the video that's raising eyebrows? Okay, well, I'll be honest. I was walking through Target and I realized I needed to buy toilet paper. And my eyes locked with something that didn't quite make sense to me. That cottonelle toilet paper with waves. I will argue with you until I'm blue in the face. The right toilet paper pattern is quilted. I won't apologize. But I had to ask the next necessary question. How did they come up with waves? How did we come up with quilting? There must be a laboratory somewhere studying how we wipe our butts. What patterns actually do the most gripping? With self-described ultra-premium brands lining the aisles, there must be some R&D in this space. And then I took it a step further. Why is toilet paper? There must have been a time before toilet paper, right? I've listed my research sources down below, but a large part of this video is sourced from a book called Wiped, The Curious History of Toilet Paper by Ronald Blummer, because it so succinctly describes the history of an item we so aggressively take for granted today. Now here's why this is an interesting line of questioning if you weren't already sold on it. It's not just that everybody poops, but everything that eats poops. It's not unique to us. In my video about suburban restaurants, I talk about an idea called cultural universals, or rather a pattern of behavior that is common across societies. And it's true that after disenfibering, pretty much every culture has some norm around the disposal of waste and the cleaning rituals thereafter. At the very core of it, all you're really trying to do is get it out of you and away from you as cleanly and quickly as possible. Now, of course, how exactly this is done varies based on the infrastructure available. A large part of the world doesn't have access to what we might consider to be a sanitary bathroom. What one culture might see as progress, another abhors. Our own way is imprinted on us from childhood, and we viscerally consider any variations on the theme practiced by others to be completely revolting. If all your life you're used to squatting over a hole in the ground and cleaning yourself with your hand, you will react with disgust when presented with a shiny white porcelain receptacle and its accompanying roll of paper. Change of any kind comes slowly because, as we shall see, in matters of the ass we are all deeply conservative. Here's something else I have to say out loud for you to think about because I had to read it to think about it myself. Why are we so hellbent on potty training our children? Why is the answer go somewhere else to do it and not do it wherever nature calls, like an animal? In her book, The Big Necessity, Rose George asks, what is toilet training if not the first attempt to turn a child into an acceptable member of society? That's, like, a huge deal. But enough psychoanalyzing people's fecals. I meant for this section of the video to be a history lesson on toilets, so we can follow that delightful rainbow to the pot of gold that is the history of toilet paper. Before designated places for potty, there were fields. Not much to talk about there. Indoor areas designed for relieving oneself are found in ancient ruins at Babylon, Crete, China, Egypt, and others. However, privacy was not expected. Take, for example, Grecian and Roman bathhouses, where people would go to socialize, bathe, and use the bathroom. Then, of course, there was the chamber pot, basically a container where you'd squat over, use, store under the furniture, and then empty out wherever. The chamber pot evolved into something called a clothes stool, which is basically a pretty aiming device you'd put over a chamber pot. Kind of looks like a toilet, no? These devices then evolved further. When it came to ornate clothes stools, the upper class could not resist outdoing one another. Madame de Pompadour, Louis XV's mistress, had her clothes stool decorated with gold-embroidered blue velvet. The device even had arms and feet inlaid with gold and the seat covered with Moroccan leather. Even the unseen chamber pots could not be left unadorned. From rough earthenware, they evolved into gleaming white porcelain objects to art, painted with the family coat of arms on the side. Literally a porcelain throne. The first flushing toilet was invented by Sir John Harrington in 1596. In 2012, Sir John Harrington was almost sued by Stan, Kyle, Clyde, and Jimmy because it killed Betsy Donovan because her son Clyde left the seat up. You can't make this stuff up. Make sure you put the seat down. We took a step closer to modern toilets in 1775 when Alexander Cummings invented the S-valve that stopped sewer gases from leaking back up from the sewer through the toilet. Our idea of a modern toilet came to be around 1913, though most people still used outhouses before 1940. And if you look around now, if your infrastructure supports it, you probably have a toilet. Okay, so we made it through the history of where it goes, but what about the aftermath? Between getting flushed in the face and flushing a toilet, when did that start? So there's this interesting field called archaeological coprology. Coprology, where scientists dig into ancient poop and see what our ancestors ate and what kind of parasites they had. We know a lot about their eating and health, but we're not entirely sure how these early humans cleaned up after themselves. We can guess that they used natural resources like snow, dirt, leaves, or moss based on their environment. As for other variations on the theme, although we have no direct evidence from the distant past, we do have a few gleanings from the observations of primitive peoples around the world who have yet to be subjected to the Squeeze the Charmin television ads. It's a direct quote from the book, by the way. Interestingly, some anthropologists have observed traditional communities using natural resources in clever ways. For example, on the island of Nauru, people used parts of the pandanus plant, both for squeezing juice and as a natural toilet paper. In South Africa, there's this tree simply known as the toilet tree due to its soft, large leaves which are ideal for bathroom duties. And then there are the people who scraped. I'll bet you can guess what was used here. Clamshells, flat sticks, things that scrape. Let's just sit with that notion for a second. Here's a clamshell. It's hard. It's rough. Oh my god, it's the wave pattern. They say cleanliness is next to godliness. Actually, in this case, it's probably more apt to say that it is godliness. The Vinaya Pitaka, the rules of conduct for Buddhist monks, outlines how one should wipe, outlining a two-phase process, where a stick is used for bulk material removal, and then the finer detailing work is done via rinsing. The world would be a lot better place if we followed Rule 7 in public bathrooms. The ancient Greeks used stones. In practice, the Greeks used 3 stones only if they were rough and therefore absorbent. 4 or more would have to be used according to the authorities in these matters if the stones were smooth. As we get into the Middle Ages, we start to use wool and cloth to scrub-a-dub-dub as evidenced by finding in unearthed latrine pits. The richer you were, the softer and higher quality the cloth you used. Not much has changed about that. No mere velvet for the second wife of Louis XVI, Madame de Maintenon used only the ultra-soft wool from merino sheep. Not to be one-upped in this matter, Louis XV's mistress, Madame de Pompadour, would only allow fine lace to touch her tail. Here in America, out in the West, people used corn cobs, which, if you think about it, has the most extreme quilted pattern you could have. Imagine the grip. And hey, depending on how recently you ate the corn off of it, maybe you'd be putting it back on the cob. That's the grossest thing I've ever said on this channel. Why did I write that? Well, okay, that's all before toilet paper. That's not why we're here. It's time to finally talk about the history of toilet paper. As with all great inventions, China got there first. It makes sense. Paper was invented in China. It's traditionally believed to have been invented in 105 CE, but there is evidence of paper that predates this by about 300 years. What we do know is that there is quite a bit of evidence that they used it for toilet paper. In 1589, the Chinese scholar official Yan Zhitui wrote, "Paper on which there are quotations or commentaries from 5 classics or the names of sages I dare not use for toilet purposes." What's interesting is every historical account of toilet paper I've come across quotes this. I'm going to skim over a good chunk of history here because it gets boring and repetitive for a bit. Basically, the gist of it is that for as long as there has been paper, people have been doing a bit of their own printing on it. But we haven't gotten to purpose-built toilet paper yet. In general, paper was reused after its contents had been read. Sometimes it was an act of reviewing a book, or an active protest of a page's contents. Along with the printed ephemera, many a priceless masterpiece was sacrificed to the cloaquina. One wonders how many Shakespeare plays, Milton poems, and Bach cantatas suffered a similar fate. And then the Industrial Revolution happened. Once the process of making massive, continuous sheets of paper was invented, the decline of other wiping methods truly began. Paper became so ridiculously cheap and common that pretty much everyone had access to it. So, why do we need toilet paper specifically for toilets? Throughout the modern era of human history, the entirety of humanity has fallen prey to a force so dangerous, so conniving, so exact. For as long as there has been true industry, there has been marketing. The premise is simple. Invent a problem, sell a solution. J.C. Gaetti of New York invented the problem. Passing plainly provided paper over your private parts is a perilous proposition purporting to produce poison, but not his paper. His paper is medicated, free of ink and arsenic. It's the greatest necessity of our age. Science labeled the man a quack. It's true that Gaetti overhyped the dangers of using regular paper, but it worked. His aggressive marketing using health-related scare tactics paid off, so much so that he was suddenly surrounded by competition. The marketing evolved from that dirty thing you do in the smallest room of your house to something you do as a part of your toilet routine. This removed a lot of the stigma in purchasing the product from pharmacies. But toilet paper still struggled to hit mainstream, because there was still no practical reason beyond the souped-up medical claims made by the manufacturers. And then the flush toilet began to get popular. As more homes transitioned from hole in the ground that could take a whole gooseneck if you were fancy enough to flush toilet that I challenge after eating too many potatoes, a thin flushable paper was required. And now we're talking big TP. Suddenly, we don't even need to lie about the health benefits anymore. We just need something that works with our newfangled flush toilets. Now, before I introduce you to the next god of toilet paper, I think it's important to clarify that up to this point, toilet paper was pre-cut sheets that you used like a stack of napkins. What you and I know as toilet paper today was invented by none other than Seth Wheeler. This is the fun part of history because we can start to show the patents that he filed. First, instead of pre-cutting the sheets of paper, he simply perforated them. And then the cardboard tube in the center, and then some holders, perforation machines, even strange and exciting toilet paper shapes. And believe it or not, we're going to come back to this exact idea in an example so recent it actually occurred while I was researching and writing this video. Charmin users, you might already know where this is going. Seth Wheeler absolutely dominated the toilet paper landscape and was truly an inventor. But it's time to talk about Scott. This is probably the first historical reference I've brought up that you might recognize. The Scott brothers started the Scott Paper Company in 1874. Making toilet paper, they employed a tactic most store brands use today. Scott's strategy was to give the store owners a proprietary interest in pushing the product by customizing the size and form of the package to their specifications. Most important, the Scotts would put the store's name on the wrapper. Along with baby powder and cold cream, you would be sold Smyth Pharmacy toilet tissue, with the Smyth logo on the package from trusted Mr. Smyth himself, who naturally would take pride in his brand. With this private label arrangement, they were making a lot of money. The Scott brothers rode the flush toilet wave all the way to the bank. In 1902, the next generation Scott, his name was Arthur, decided to take a different approach with a relatively new form of marketing. Branding. Using the name Waldorf, Scott's sales exploded. To this point, he was simply packaging, cutting, and reselling other manufacturers' paper. He saw the success of his business and began to vertically integrate. By the end of his life, they owned the trees, the mills, and everything else it takes to make toilet paper. The Scott Company continued to be wildly successful until the 1960s, when they started trying to make a whole bunch of different products, sometimes not even paper-related. After a massive downsize, they were bought by Kimberly-Clark. You can still get Scott-branded toilet paper today, and if you do, it's likely that it was made in the very same factory that Arthur Scott built. I want to revisit the thoughts that sent me down the sewers and was the reason I made this whole video in the first place. I simply cannot get this image out of my mind regarding modern toilet paper R&D. I imagine a group of scientists and researchers with volumes of data on pattern efficiency, paper absorption, computer simulations, real-world trials. I mean, this is how science is done. You start with a problem, you think of a solution, and you test to see which one is the best. And yet, somehow, you still come up with a wave pattern. I would love insight into this process. What exactly is the nature of toilet paper research? While I was writing this, an article was published on Slate.com called How I Got to the Bottom of a Vexing Toilet Paper Mystery. A senior scientist of butt wiping explains what he's been up to. This is, the article for this section of the video. I was so excited about it. Unbeknownst to me, because I like my toilet paper ads cringe-free, Charmin started changing how they perforate their toilet paper. Instead of a straight cut across, they're using scalloped edges. The author of this article was curious as to why this was, and so he got in touch with the Director of Research at Development at Procter & Gamble, Greg Weaver. P&G was trying to solve one of the largest issues in toilet paper use today: the incomplete tear. To solve the problem, it took Charmin 5 years. As with all R&D, you have to start with the R. The problem they discovered was that toilet paper fibers run perpendicularly to the tear, and the tearing motion varies dramatically based on where the toilet paper is in relation to the user. We came to the table with a lot of different options, Weaver said. In the R&D labs, Weaver and other scientists hand-punched perforations into blank rolls of paper, looking for the right shape. They tried a diagonal line, matching the angle of the force of the average tear, but discovered, well, it works great on one side, but not so great on the other. Hey, remember that patent Seth Wheeler had with the diagonal perforation? Over 100 years ago. Man was onto something. The group found that the wavy line was best able to withstand the mix of downward and sideways forces in most consumers' tearing actions. Once we tried that, the feedback we got was, that tears like a hot knife through butter. Now this feedback he references must be from field tests, right? I wanted to know more though. Linked from this article, I was led to a 2019 article published by Popular Science that basically describes everything I ever wanted to know about this. It even has a video about it. I swear, Google really dropped the ball. This is like the first thing that should come up as a result when I type in the phrase toilet paper R&D. P&G has many tests and trials for the physical strengths of toilet paper. Custom machines probe, prod, wet, and wipe samples of a variety of brands and prototypes of paper. They use NASA's fake poop formulation called FeClone. Here's the patent for Kimberly-Clark's version. But it didn't interact with the skin the way real poop does. It feels more like sticky clay, as you can see in the video that I linked in the description below. So, in 2010, the company started working on an artificial BM that has the same surface energy, fluid dynamics, and adhesion to human skin as the real stuff. The result is made of food-grade ingredients and even comes in a trio of textures, from diarrhea to constipation. It's got everything but the smell. The article then goes into the qualitative aspects of this, which, have to exist. This usually involves asking participants how they wipe, what they feel when they wipe, challenges, hopes, and dreams of patterns, the whole 9 yards. Go read the article and then watch its associated video. It's really cool. Right, I almost forgot about the patterns. It's not just for grip strength. A roll with a pattern appears higher quality than those without. It serves as a way to strengthen and bulk up the toilet paper while increasing its perceived softness, a trait that is quite desirable. It also contributes to product differentiation. J.C. Gaetti plastered his name all over his creation, urging you to beware of the competition. Today's embossed patterns serve a very similar purpose. I have absolutely no idea how to end this video. The history of toilet paper is one not often thought about. It went from a luxury item in the early 1900s to an essential part of your everyday existence in the mid-1900s to something you definitely panicked about in 2020 before fading back into relative obscurity. This modern staple of everyday life seems like it's here to stay in its current form forever and ever. Or maybe not. The bidet seems to be gaining traction in the US. It is technically more sanitary than toilet paper because, well, you aren't touching your butt. Something about the fact that with everything we use, whether you take it for granted or not, someone had to make it. There was decisions made, research done. Someone made this their career. There's a whole R&D team working on toilet paper at every toilet paper company. That's someone's job, and I think that's kind of cool. Toilet paper might be a high-profile case of an untold story like this, but the idea of hidden industries fascinates me. It's like Mike Rowe's dirty jobs, but the science kind. I don't know if I'm explaining it well. Anyway, like I said, I have no idea how to end this video, so I guess I'll just end it in the most appropriate way I know how. Oh my god. I get it.